across the country are running for office at record numbers. Progressive women in particular have gained a lot of notice for running, for winning, and in some cases, tragically losing when they should have won, when they took on the establishment. You may have seen the notable movie, Knock Down the House, where it featured 4 progressive women running for Congress and for Senate across the country on a working class, economic, populist message, unapologetically progressive, fighting against the institution. Well, the fight continues. Amy Vilela is a former candidate for Congress in Nevada's 4th District. She is a surrogate for Bernie Sanders, and she is on the board of advisors of Matriarch PAC, which we have talked about on this show. Matriarch, of course, is supporting working class progressive women running for Congress across the country, giving them the infrastructure, support, guidance that really doesn't exist on the left at the capacity needs to fight against the establishment, which of course will bend over backwards for their people, supporting up, propping up oligarch backed policies and corporate interests. So Amy, thank you for joining the Nomiki show and for being a friend of the movement.
Thank you for having me.
I want to start off with Knock Down the House because at this point, I think most progressives have seen the movie. And if you haven't, it's on Netflix. Go check it out right now. As soon as you have 2 hours, block it off and bring friends to watch it because it's moving, it's chilling. And I have no doubt that there were moments that were not caught on camera or didn't make the final cut. So what was it like? You're running for Congress for the first time. You're running against the establishment. And you have a camera crew following you around. What was that like?
I really thought that Rachel had lost her mind. I was like, why do you want to come and record us? Because everyone hates us.
Rachel who? Rachel's the...
Rachel Lear. She's the director.
Right.
And I was just thinking, I was sitting there like, well, I guess if you want to come out and videotape it, that's fine. It was, at times it was difficult, to be honest, to have her there. You're really putting your most vulnerable times in your entire run out there for the world to see. But I thought it was important to put the message out there because, running for office is extremely difficult. Running as a progressive is even more difficult. But I thought that the message really needed to get out there. People needed to know what it looked like, not only to help motivate others to run, but also to shed some light on what we're up against and why it's so important that when we have progressives running that people come in and help lift them up.
So it's interesting that you say that because I wonder how many progressives who ran in 2018 were running to actually win or were running to change the conversation, make an impact, and build out the revolution. When you decided to run, what was on your mind?
I had been, out there in activism. I had been trying to move one of our congressmen on Medicare for All. He was a member of the Progressive Caucus. And on nearly every other issue, he was progressively voting. I shared my story with him on Mother's Day weekend. Went through, actually was crying. I was newly coming out of grief, so I really didn't have the fortitude to sit there and actually do it without sobbing.
Telling your story of your daughter.
Right. And I was actually holding her hair in my hand as I was telling it and explaining to him what an impact it had on me and that I was there fighting for everyone else because I myself was dual insured and that the ACA had not gone far enough, that we needed to go farther. It was a good place to start, but she still died underneath the ACA. And I was begging him to support Medicare for All. And he looked at me and said, I heard your story. I didn't have to be here this weekend. I could have been out enjoying myself.
Wow.
And I thought that moment, it really stung because I was like, you are not a public celebrity. You're a public servant. Right. And at this point, I had been doing all kinds of research. I was just researching everything I could about Medicare for All, trying to figure out how it worked. Being a CFO, I wanted to understand how it would affect businesses and individuals. And it was a new concept to me, as it was to most people and at that point in time. And so I knew at that point that there was 35,000 people dying every year. And I understood what was happening behind those boardroom doors. And I understood what part, corporate profit motive played in my daughter's death. Mm-hmm. That was unacceptable to me. And I wasn't going to sit back, and I was not going to allow it to happen. I'd never had intentions of running for office, to be quite honest. People kept coming up and saying, Amy, run. And I was like, you are absolutely nuts. I am not your typical, person who'd be running for office. And, eventually it was like, if not me, then who? And I wanted to do something to help other people. I wish that more people had fought the good fight in time to save my daughter. And how could I sit here and tell her story and sit there and have people empathize with me if I'm not willing to go out and do everything I can to make sure that others don't suffer the same fate?
As a woman who comes from a working class background, who's fought the obstacles, I mean, you've had obstacles that many Americans have unfortunately faced, given the lack of health care, the lack of resources. There's just so many, and this is under the ACA, as you said. So that was supposed to be the buffer for those who didn't have an option. When you take that kind of story out on the campaign trail, how does that rub against the politics of campaigning as a progressive? I mean, when it's so personal for you, and then you are put up against an establishment that's looking at things through data, is corporate backed, there's talking points. What was that experience like for you?
To be honest with you, it was enraging. You don't see this in the movie, but the main opponent, who actually is now a congressman, would sit there after I tell Shalene's story and, explain why we need Medicare for all, would be like, I know how Amy feels. I lost my grandma when I was 18.
Are you serious?
And I'm just sitting there like, I am seriously going to come out of my chair and drop kick somebody, because it was so difficult to sit there and to listen to this, and then, see every single time him raising his hand that he supports Medicare for all, knowing that he was not going to support it once in office. You get to know a lot about the other candidates on the trail, because you're at so many events together. I knew this was not his top priority, and I could see the way that he was talking about it to skirt around actually supporting it, right? Mm-hmm. He was like, well, I support it. I'm just worried about, the veterans. And I'm like, well, I'm a military spouse. Like, I actually have skin in this game. And the bill, has no intention of getting rid of the VA.
Yeah.
So when it specifically called that out, then it's like, what's your excuse?
Right.
What's your excuse?
Amy, Nevada politics is notoriously dirty. And one of the things that we want to highlight on this show is the realities of what's actually going on. It's when you run for office as a progressive, the establishment will go after you. If they don't, you're very lucky, and it's an unusual situation. Not everybody gets through. A lot of people are attacked, smeared. They manipulate. They do a lot of things to knock down progressives, especially progressives who won't compromise. And you are one of the strongest progressives I know personally. You have a backbone. You are loyal. You act in solidarity. And as a result, they want to ruin you. What are some of the tactics? Because I think this is important. I mean, if people decide to run for office, it's exhilarating. It's extremely hard work. In some cases, it can change your life, not always for the better. And I think it's important to know this going in. And it shouldn't deter you, but you should be aware. So I'm sharing my story over and over, but I think it's important others share their stories too of what could potentially happen.
They will throw everything at you. When I first entered the race, I was primarying a sitting congressman. He declined to run again because of some allegations that were asserted against him. And then all of a sudden, I have candidates being flown in from Washington, D.C. that were in a role as a lobbyist and being dumped into the race. Lots of money was spent to defeat me. That is the reality. And, but I want to make this point, though, because I've had a lot of people say, Amy got creamed, oh, my gosh, she didn't do well and she lost. And that's not always an indicator of failure.
Oh, absolutely.
When we're in this movement, the end goal is to move to move your communities, to move the conversation. I lost a race. I didn't lose the conversation.
That's right.
So when people are running, you have to keep that in mind. It's not always, of course, we're running to win. Of course, we're running to win. But when we're in this, we need to also understand that this is bigger than even us individually. Right. This is about us collectively as a movement. And there are lots of, stumbling blocks and battles won before we win the war. Battles lost before we win the war. But, the ultimate goal, again, is to keep the movement going. And it will also have an effect on your personal life.
That's right.
I knew going in that it would. I understood, that my career as a CFO would essentially be over if I went ahead and ran for office. I was correct. Nobody wants to hire someone for a high-level position within a corporation that is considered to be, someone that could be questioned about their politics or, is risky. So I am now considered risky. But, that really didn't bother me because I knew at that point, I was already transitioning out of the role of a CFO in the corporate world because that Amy died with my daughter. And so I knew that I could no longer function in that capacity anymore, that my drive and my purpose was for a much bigger cause than helping increase the wealth of shareholders.
As a progressive woman running for Congress and an activist, we in the movement have faced obstacles that many probably don't even know are coming from organized efforts by the centrists to take us down. It's not just that they're going after working class people and smearing us and erasing us, but women in particular are facing more. They're being called out in so many elaborate ways that, we talk about a lot, just you and I, but also we talk about on the show that, they're blocking people from getting on the ballot. They're suing them while they're running for office. And then once they get to a certain percentage point and they're a real threat, then they go after their FEC filings because ultimately they want to smear the candidate and tie them up in court. And you as a CFO know this very, very well. So as a woman, what can an audience, what can the movement do to support these women?
We definitely need to come out and support organizations like Matriarch, organizations across the board that are supporting these women. It really comes from the outside more than the progressives that are supporting candidates across, race, across identity. For instance, I'll give you an example. So when I was running, and a lot of women are going to get this when they run, what are your qualifications? They didn't ask anybody else that was male up down there what your qualifications are. Right. And, here I am, I am pretty far up in business. I'm a CFO. But more important, I've lived the experience. I've been that single mother on welfare, on Medicaid, on WIC, and struggling through poverty. I understand what's at stake and where the flaws in the system are. So when it came time for the news stations, they put out a guide for who's running. By everybody else's name, they had, such and such is the executive, blah, 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 or had their roles listed out. Next to my name, they had Amy Vilela sometimes throws healthcare rallies.
Oh, my goodness.
So it just shows you the level that they'll go to actually push down accomplishments and anything that's going on with you. And they do come after you. They view you as someone who is going to be vulnerable. And when we hear about all this unity from the party that we're going to stand behind women first, many women came out and supported my male counterpart.
Right.
They weren't talking about identity and making sure we have more women in office at that point. So really, when they talk about, identity and unity and helping women run, that's really just a false narrative. And so we need to, as progressives, really do the work that's necessary to get more women in office. And that means supporting their campaigns, donating, volunteering, and this notion, I want to especially say this, that, because we're progressives, we don't need funds. That is false.
Right.
We need just as much, almost as much as our counterparts, if not more in some cases, to counter the attacks that are coming at us. And we don't have the mechanism of doing it on a national scale. So it might mean that you need to donate a little bit more to the organizations that are supporting them, and hopefully to their campaigns, because we will get the change we need, hopefully with Bernie in office. But we're also going to need people in the House and in the Senate. And if we don't do that, then we are going to be handicapping Bernie as a president.
And fight for them when it gets tough. I mean, there are a lot of all-stars, and we're so grateful that they're in Congress. But when you're deciding who you want to donate to this cycle, it's not that those people don't deserve the money. Of course they do. They need to be there fighting, and they have a lot of attacks on them. But maybe consider the candidates that are running right now that are just getting started out, because that money goes a long way. There's a talent deficit too, in that
yes,
they don't have access to a lot of the experienced consultants because of the blacklist, but also just because the progressive landscape is still for the most part new. This version of the progressive landscape. So we're training talent. We're organizations like Matriarch and other organizations are trying to build that infrastructure, but we got to be real. They will smear progressive women first, and they'll do it hard in a dirty, you and I have both experienced it, in a dirty way. And it's a lonely place. So the more people that are out there supporting you and pushing back, the more that these centrists, because it's big forces that go after you. It's big media that's going after the little guy and making examples of them. So don't be discouraged, Sharon. Just be aware.
Remember that the stronger you become, the more they'll go after you.
Right.
So this first round of us running all over the country, this really, all of us in this first round that ran in 2018, this really was a testing ground. We were learning as we went. We really didn't know how to run. Well, now, we do know how to run. We know why we lost. We know where we could have done better. And now we're trying to funnel these up in organizations like Matriarch to pass that information on. But the stronger we become, the more that they're going to come after you.
That's right.
And so important to have the support of organizations and of all of the people, not only in their home states, but across this nation, donating so that they can have the resources necessary to fight back. And that means having attorneys on call. That's right. I mean, because I can't think of how many people have gotten lawsuits at the last freaking second for ridiculous reasons, FEC claims. I mean, it's just, the list goes on. And you have to remember, these are individuals that also, they're being held personally liable. So if they aren't able to defend themselves, this could essentially, ruin their lives after running for office. So it's so important that we support our brothers and sisters who are out there, fighting this fight and running for office.
Because they want to punish you. I mean, I can say that firsthand. They will go after you because they want you to pay for legal fees. They don't want you to run again. They don't want you using your voice, especially if you're a stronger candidate and you're more, you've made a difference. And now, I mean, if you run again, they know you're coming. And so this is what solidarity looks like. Exactly. Amy, thank you. Thank you for your commitment to the movement. Where can people find you?
Well, you can go to amyforthepeople.com or at Amy, the number 4, the people is my call sign on Twitter and Instagram. And you can check me out there.
And you're on the campaign trail for Bernie Sanders.
I sure am. I'm actually also the Nevada co-chair. So I'm busy in Nevada. I've decided to take this cycle off at the very least to make sure we get Bernie Sanders elected.
There you go. Well, thank you for your commitment to the movement, and we'll be watching.
Thanks so much.